Welcome to TaNaCh Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA, another episode of Controversial Issues with the most controversial rabbi on the internet, Rabbi Chaim Checkmate Coffman. Welcome back, Rabbi. How are you tonight?
Doing great. You know, it's all about the introduction.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Okay, so another good topic. This particular topic came to mind. Wasn't my idea for the show tonight, but I'm kind of glad you're covering it because of the idea some people. Actually, I don't even want to clarify that because it's such a broad topic. I just want to let you go. If I have any questions at the end, I'll kind of pop a few questions in on you. So I'm just going to go ahead and hand it right off to you.
Okay. Always a pleasure as we, as we say over here. We spoke a few weeks ago about suffering. This whole idea, about where suffering comes from, why the righteous suffer. There's a lot that goes into it. A lot we don't see, we don't fathom, what the repercussions are of our actions, right? And this is something that we speak about a lot, and a number of things. One is, obviously seeing the bigger picture, what my obligations are and how they affect yourself, how do they affect others, so to speak. So, our actions, the Rav Chaim of Volozhin, the famous student of the Vilna Gaon, Rabbi Elijah Vilna, more than 250 years ago, in his epic work Nefesh HaChaim, literally the soul of life, the Rav Chaim Volozhin says, a person thinks their actions don't matter, right? And so he goes into detail, and he explains very simply. A lot of it has to do with Kabbalah, but basically, he explains, our actions have such ramifications. You see by Adam and Eve. What did Adam and Eve do? They ate from the tree. They ate from the tree of knowledge. God said, don't eat from the tree of knowledge. So what happened when they ate from the tree of knowledge? God had to go to plan B, right? God brought, Adam and Eve brought that to the world. So God understood, this could happen, that they could eat from the tree of knowledge. And then they get thrown out of the Garden of Eden because they're not allowed to eat from the tree of life because, they have to die. They have to go back to the ground, so to speak, or into the ground. Body has to disintegrate. The soul gets judged, so to speak. But, that's not a Jewish concept, even though, like we said, God had to go to plan B. So I remember I was interviewing for be a rabbi of a synagogue somewhere in the States. So they wanted me to come speak, and I went there to speak, and I spoke at a Jewish community center, and I spoke about this topic, reincarnation. So one of the first things I mentioned, was the fact that I said I want everyone to know reincarnation is a Jewish concept. When I said that, 3 people fainted. So we had to bring EMTs, we had to bring smelling salts for people. People thought like a strange thing, like, that reincarnation, is a Jewish concept. So the question is, where did it all come from? Right? So we do understand the Torah says clear in a number of places, right? As we say every day in the second paragraph of the Shema, that we say that if I do the right thing, right? If I do the right thing, then God takes care of our needs. Meaning there's going to be, there'll be food, there'll be rain, everything will be taken care of. If not, there's payback. There will be repercussions, there will be ramifications for what we do. So God takes into account every detail that we do, what preceded it, what follows it, where we were holding, right? One of the things that, is certainly a benefit for us is the fact that we don't get judged based on future potential. And where do we learn that out from? Of all people, we learn it out from Yishmael. Why? Because Hagar turns away. She doesn't want to see Ishmael die. An angel comes and says, Hagar, what's the matter? This, that. He shows her an oasis, and Ishmael is saved. So the Torah over there says, Ba'asher hu sham, where he is now. Right? So the angel, so Rashi brings down over there, the angels ask, God, what are you doing over here? Don't you know in the future the offspring of Ishmael are going to cause a lot of problems to the Jews? Right? They're going to kill a lot of Jews, going to cause a lot of problems. So God says, you're right. Very true. So the angels say, so wipe him out now. Let him die. Let him die now. So God asks, okay, I would do that, but there's only one problem. The problem is Ishmael guilty right now, or is he not guilty? Right? In other words, is he liable for death penalty, or he's not liable? Right? At this point, Ishmael's a child. So we understand a child under the age of bar mitzvah, either 12 in a day for a girl, 13 in a day for a boy, and some say to the age of 20. Right? They're not liable yet. Right? In other words, even if a child, God forbid, is born, is born with leukemia or mentally challenged or any of these things, it's not the punishment of the child. Right? Why is it not the punishment of the child? Because the child's not liable. The child's only liable again at the age of 12, the age of 13. Right? Child can't be liable. So if the child's not liable, what's going on? So it has to do with the soul. Right? It has to do with the soul, has to go through. So what does God do? So God takes our actions. Now, this is, not so easy to explain, but anytime someone does anything, right, for good or for bad, that action's going to be taken up to heaven. God's going to look at it. God's going to judge it in spiritual terms, in physical terms, and then God's going to throw it back down to this world in all the different ramifications how it works, right? Give an example, right? Let's say a Jew makes a blessing over an apple. He gets the right blessing. He says, Brei 8, grows from the tree, very good. But when he made the blessing, he wasn't really thinking, he's just hungry. He throws out the blessing, etc. So he gets credit, right? He takes something physical, takes an apple, takes something physical. What does he do? He sanctifies it. Sanctifies it by making a blessing, saying, God, you're the source of all blessing. You're the king of the world who gave us the fruit of the tree. Very good. But you know what? Where was their mind when they were making the blessing? Where was their mind? They were thinking, I'm hungry. Let me eat. And they throw out the blessing. They spit out the blessing. No pun intended over here. They spit out the blessing. Very good. So what happened? They get credit. They got credit. They made the right blessing. Maybe they didn't have all the greatest intention. Forget about Kabbalah, right? They didn't have the greatest intention. So what happened? So they get credit. They might get a C minus, right? Maybe they'll get a C plus. We'll be generous, but they get credit. But that action at that point is going to get judged for what they did, right? What they did, where they're holding now, not where they're holding before, not where they're holding after, so to speak, but where they're holding now, and it gets judged. Now, let's say they did something wrong, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be something egregious. Let's say they did something wrong. So even if they do something wrong, that also gets judged, and the ramifications, right? It doesn't just affect you. That event, whatever you did, can affect people around you, can affect your kids, can affect your spouse, so to speak. I remember, I was first engaged. There was a book called Made in Heaven by Vari Kaplan of blessed memory. And I never made it past the introduction, right? It's all about getting married and what we're supposed to do, how we're supposed to give to our spouse and this, all these different things. Why didn't I make it past the introduction? Because in the introduction, what does he say? He says, this event, you're getting married. It doesn't affect you. It doesn't just affect you. It affects your spouse. It affects all your future children. I'm like, who, me? Right? Slam the book shut. Right? It's an intense thing. What we do has an effect. So God takes all this into account, right? Calculates it in a manner where every single element, this sounds like the Matrix, where every single element is interconnected with every other one. and the structure of creation as a whole, right? Imagine, there's a mind-boggling idea. Whatever you do now, this split second, the next split second, in the next hour, in the next month, whatever the action is, you can't just say, well, this has no effect on anyone else. Not true. Not true. It does affect you, no question, right? But let's say a person is liable for doing something very severe, and they may be liable for the death penalty, let's say. But let's say, even if that's true, God can have mercy. Why can God have mercy? Because maybe people need this person. Maybe, his family can't function without them, at least at this point in time. So, God needs to keep them alive. Even if they did something, egregious, but it can have myriad effects over so many different things. So therefore, when an individual gets judged, God's going to take into account where that person, as we mentioned, where they're holding with respect to who they are right now, right? They're going to get judged again, as we said by Ishmael, where they're holding now. So they're going to be judged as well in relation to people that preceded them, their descendants who are going to follow them, right? As in their city, their community, whoever's associated with that person. I mean, this is a serious thing. You can't just say, well, I'm in my own room doing my own thing. No one can see me, no one can hear me, at least not at the moment. I mean, even though I'm a sealed room, probably people can hear, so I got to be quiet here, right, in general. But, taking everything into account, we're given an assignment. Everybody's given an assignment and challenges as well, depending on what? Depending on their specific responsibility serving God. So what does that mean in the vernacular? That means God is going to give each person, he's going to give each person their individual soul, right? And their soul is given a message, right? And that soul has what to do in this world. Now, problem is, someone's going to ask, and that is, how do I know? How do I know what I'm supposed to be doing? How do you know what you're supposed to be doing in this world? How do you know what you're sent here for? What that responsibility is? Jews have a responsibility. Non-Jews have a responsibility. Right? So, and a person can get distracted, totally distracted. I had it explained to me once. I'm not saying this is the reason or potential reason, but the question is, how do I know? How do we know what we're doing here? What we need, let's say, to fix up? Someone once explained to me like this. Imagine what, the hardest thing for a person to do. In other words, for them, they would rather slit their eyeballs with glass, than do it, right? I'm not going to get graphic here, right? But it's like the most difficult thing for them to do, right? In other words, some people may say for them it's showing gratitude to others that help them. For other people, the hardest thing for them to do is either they did the wrong thing, to say that they're sorry, right? Something that's incredibly hard, right? Almost seemingly impossible for a person to do, to overcome. Now, so someone explained to me, that could be what a person is doing in this world to fix. Now, again, is that the only thing? No. So, certainly not. But we don't know, right? Our soul doesn't know. Our soul doesn't remember. Once the body, once the person is born, you don't remember. The soul will never remember, at least according to Kabbalah, as a great Kabbalist once explained to me, right? That a soul will never remember, in general, what it's doing here. It won't remember from past lives. Now, what's the obvious question on that? The obvious question is, what about regression? What about putting someone under deep hypnosis? And, there are stories, people being put under deep hypnosis that spoke about previous lives they went through, different things that they would never know. And impossible for them to know. So I remember, I asked this rabbi of mine, very much steeped in Kabbalah. I asked him, is that possible? Is that possible, at least, according to Kabbalah? And he said, no. in this world, that should not happen. So it could be, I'm just gonna throw this out there, take it for what it's worth. It could be that when a person's awake and a person is running around this world doing all kinds of things, that they're not gonna remember. Absolutely, they're not gonna remember, right? But could be, when they're, someone is like picking at their soul, so to speak, and they're, deep under hypnosis. Could be they'll remember something, within their deep recesses of who they are. Could be, could be. According to Kabbalah, that shouldn't be. But, maybe when you're awake, that's not going to happen. So that gets into the question, which we'll just throw out there. Gets into the question, I get this question a lot. What about deja vu? Kind of like these bad Nightmare on Elm Street movies, right? These, Freddy Krueger movies. Guy, a person in a dream said, wait a minute, I've been here before. I've done this before. Like what's going on? So deja vu, a person could say, could be somewhere, and they, and they may think to themselves, they may feel something. They may feel something in that place, but they can't explain what it is, or, I'm not saying they're getting a vision, they're seeing something, it could be, they feel, maybe they feel something. Okay, maybe, maybe, but that's not, we don't hold by deja vu. Why not? But, they're going to say, what does that person feel? I can't answer, right? I can't answer what that is. What I can say is that we mentioned before, the soul is never going to remember. It's never going to remember what it was doing here. It's never going to remember anything from past life experience. So every person has a mission, right? Every person has challenges. Those challenges, either we do ourselves, we mess up things and we make these challenges for ourselves, or these challenges, that can be, and we can also have challenges in certain ways that we are programmed, that we, that our DNA, which comes, certainly comes from, made up from our parents and different things, that DNA, is going to bring all kinds of challenges, right? Some people are more lazy than others. Some people have more affinities to certain things than other people. No one's the same. No one person is the same. But we come from, as Rashi and others say, that when God formed, man from the four corners of the earth, from the dust, or the four corners of the earth, right? It's God made like an imprint, right? And that imprint, let's say like a coin. So everyone is formed the same way, right? We all have the same form, some more, some less, some better, some worse, whatever it is, but everyone's got the same form, right? Gonna have a head, gonna have arms, gonna have legs, other parts of the body, inside, outside, very good. So we're pretty much all the same in that, in that sense. But the challenges people have, totally different. Totally different. Everyone has, certain things that we all have in common, but in general, some of the challenges for some people will be more difficult, than others. Depends obviously on what the challenges are and what our responsibility is, right? In other words, the mission Pirkei Avos, Ethics of Our Fathers, tells us that there are many things we're not in control of, right? You're born against your will. We have no choice who our parents are. And we die against our will, right? We're not in control, when a person dies. So Coffman would say, in parentheses, you still have to live, right? You still have an obligation to live. So the question is, there are many things we're not in control, right? Who our parents are, who our siblings are, socioeconomic situation, many things. We think, fame, right? I'm going to live forever. Forget it, right? We think we're in control of so many things. We're not in control. Many, many things we're not in control, even though, we may think otherwise. So depending on what our divine mission is going to depend on God decides, again, as we said, which parents you're born into. You're going to be wealthy. You're going to be poor. You're going to be both. You're going to have all these ups and downs, and how that's going to affect you, your kids as well, right? Now, everybody knows, whatever we go through, whatever upheavals we have, whether it's minor, whether it's major. So, a person has a family, so everybody's affected. Everybody's affected. A lot of people losing jobs now, going into a recession. Don't want to, upset the Democrats, but we're going into a recession. I think that's pretty clear. And that affects, right? Totally affects people. And, that's also part of the test. Everyone has it. I'm not saying, everyone's getting let go, but, a lot of people have these challenges. And there are challenges being wealthy. Are you going to help others? Right? Are you going to say, oh, no, they should work harder. I worked hard. Let them work harder, etc. Are they going to waste their money? Are they going to think they're God's gift to the world? Are they going to be haughty? Are they going to be, conceited? And then you got the test of someone being poor, right? Someone who's poor has to be thankful for even the little that they have. But all these things, see, the Mishnah in Sanhedrin says, Bishvili nivra olam. For me, the world was created, i.e. for me, not for you. Every person is their own world. So if we're our own world, you'll say, doesn't matter about anyone else, right? It's all, I get the Sybil complex. It's all about me, myself, and I. All three of us, right? All five of us. Who knows? Who knows how many people inside of me, right? So you got all five of us here, but it doesn't just affect you, right? It affects other people. It affects other people in your family. How you relate to others. Person comes in from a long day, family's all excited to see you, or, whoever it is, and you don't say anything. You don't answer. You're in your own world. You need a little bit of downtime, this, that, So you come in with, let's say, with a sour face. So your kids, your spouse can say, like, what's the matter with you? What happened to you? Like, why do we have to suffer because of, what you went through? So what we go through on a daily basis, we have ups and downs. We can have 75, 100 different mood swings an hour, something like that. We go up and down, like a yo-yo. Good things, bad things. We hear things, we see things, all kinds of things that affects us, right? But that doesn't just affect us. How do we deal with it? How do we see it? As we always say, how do we see the bigger picture? How do we put everything together? But that doesn't just affect you. That affects everyone around you, right? So depending what our mission is, as we said, is going to depend on God decides, where we are, where we should be, or, because of things we did, or because God says, okay, I want to test you over here. I want to bring out certain dormant character traits. So I have to put you through this, or put you through that, or, whatever it is. But all these things have an effect. They have an effect. The question is how we deal with it, right? And how it appears to others. So you say, what do I care? The rest of the world. I'm living in my own world, my own bubble. Yeah, you are, but you have to function in this world, right? You have to deal with others, and dealing with others doesn't mean I can do whatever I want. I was up north last week, and I was in a bus station, waiting for the bus to go back to Jerusalem. I was in there waiting, and all of a sudden they're screaming, like total screaming. There was a bunch of kiosks there. People buy food, different things, and so this Arab woman is like screaming. She couldn't. It wasn't that tall either. She's like screaming, top of her lungs, this, that, and the other thing. Making a whole commotion. And they have security there, so trying to deal with this whole thing, and whatever. And the person screaming the top of their lungs. So a lot of people got entertained. That was kind of entertaining. Kind of fun. It was sad. More sad than anything else. But I'm sitting there come on, this person screaming at the top of their lungs, even louder than me. It's hard to imagine, right? But what was the lesson? Can't say exactly. I was listening, to different, classes on my MP3. So you see this whole thing, different things go on, and they're like, the world's about me. It's all about me and what I do, and and this, and I don't care about you. I don't care. I'm holding up traffic. I don't care if I'm double parked. I don't care. All these different things. For me, the world, the world is created. Great. For you, the world is created. So what about everyone else? So you have a right, to park at in a 45-degree angle and block up traffic because you had to run in and get something to eat. Well, you had to run in and, do something. I see this. It's it's absolutely nuts. Especially being on a bus, and the bus has to try and get around a certain area, and someone's parked. So, someone's parked that can't get by. So they block up traffic. Why are they allowed to block up traffic? Not allowed to block up traffic. Why do they do it? They're in a rush. This, that. For the world, it's created for me. So, okay, so I'll get to it. I'll move my car in a minute. So you have to wait. Big deal. I had to go get something to eat or whatever the case is. Right? So it gives you a right. Who gives you a right? It's not just for me the world is created. What about everyone else? Derech Eretz Kidma LaTorah. Having proper character traits comes before Torah. Absolutely comes before Torah. So what gives you the right to mess other people up because you're in a rush or, whatever the case is? You don't have a right to do that. Right? But we're affected. That's the point. We're affected by our own actions. Our own actions have repercussions for other people, and other people's actions and what they do and what they say, they have repercussions for us. Right? So over here, God gives everyone their divine mission. And depending on where we're holding and what we're doing, we can pass, we can fail, etc. But at the end of the day, it's based on what we do. It's based on what we do. Now, getting into okay, if we have a divine mission, and even if we don't know what that divine mission is, God gives an obligation to Jews and non-Jews to tap into what he wants. To tap into what he wants us to do. So how are we supposed to do that? How in the world are we supposed to do that? The way we're supposed to do it is tap into what the Torah says. We have to keep what his mitzvahs are to the best of our ability. Now, if that's true, and we have to tap in, what if we don't tap in the right way? What if we have, what if there are greater expectations? Now you're going to tell me, okay, person has greater expectations. God can't judge that till the end. He can only judge according to where you're holding now. So what if at the end of the day, person lived 70 years, 80 years, 90 years, 50 years, whatever it is in this world, and then God's going to say, okay, what did they do? There are two videos, according to Kabbalah, that we see, at the end of our lives. At the end of our lives. And anyone who's had an out-of-body experience, they all say the same thing. The first thing is they see their life flash before their eyes. What does their life flashing before their eyes mean? They see every last action that they did, every last thought in a millisecond. They see it, very quickly, right? Quicker than, you could read a newspaper, turn the pages a million miles an hour, right? That's it. Everyone agrees. Jews, non-Jews, men, women, doesn't matter, right? They all say the same thing. That's the first thing, that they see the life flash before their eyes. What's the second thing? So that's the first movie. What's the second movie? Second movie is now, what were the repercussions of what you did? What should you have done, right? Why did certain things happen after the fact, right? That's a whole different thing, right? That's about potential, so to speak. So the question is, okay, we're judged, for what we do. So suffering, as we spoke about, we're not going to rehash it, but suffering and pain can be imposed on people to wake them up. That nobody suffers in this world for no reason. In other words, suffering comes, but certain things we may go through could be that much greater for, let's say, a minor infraction. So we learn out the Korban Aaron in Leviticus chapter 11, the Or Chaim HaKadosh, a blessed memory, brings them down, talking about the sin of Nadav and Avihu. So very hard to imagine how great Nadav and Avihu were, what the mistake they made, that they were liable for the death penalty. Right? It seems pretty clear. Torah says either they brought in incense into the Holy of Holies, they weren't allowed to. When it wasn't Yom Kippur, they thought it was an auspicious time. When the Mishkan, the tabernacle went up, so they thought it was an auspicious time. They did it for the sake of heaven. But you know what? You're not allowed to reinvent the wheel. So God says, not what I wanted you to do. Some say when they did the priestly service, they drank. They drank a little bit. They weren't allowed to. There are a lot of other potential reasons. The Talmud gives. But it all doesn't matter. Why? Because the Korban Aaron says, bottom line is, the closer you are to the king, more responsibility you have. If a person was a mail carrier, let's say, and they did something wrong, even let's say something egregious, you think the king's going to sit there and say, okay, let's chop off his head? I mean, if it affected the king, maybe, right? But if it doesn't affect the king, okay, other people will deal with them. the person will get fired, whatever the case is. The person, low man on the totem pole, no pun intended. No one's going to care. Who's going to care what the person did, right? He's a mail carrier. He's a ball boy, right? He's a ball boy. What do we care? What do we care what he did? But if you're second in command to the king, you have a higher position, and you messed up. And let's say you made a mistake. You could have made a serious mistake, let's say. So the king says, I didn't hire you. I'm not paying you all this money in order for you to, to mess up in such a way. But let's say the person made a minor mistake. Anyone else who would have made a minor mistake, nobody cares. Right? It's a minor thing. But what does the king say? The king says, what are you doing? You're second in command. You can't do that. Even if it's something minor, no one else would care. But since you're very close to the king, even a minor mistake, it could be catastrophic. So a friend of mine would say, okay, so let's not be so close to the king. Let's not learn as much, and God won't have as many claims against us. What's the problem? What's the obvious problem? What if you have greater potential? So to have in a person's life, person gets judged and God's going to say, why'd you do this, do that? You could have had such greater potential. He says, no, I didn't have that great potential. Right? God's going to show otherwise. Right? So it could be that, someone who's very righteous, they could suffer tremendously in this world for minor infractions. Something who's not as righteous, they may suffer, but, maybe not to that level because they're not as close to the king, even though that might be a claim against them. They should have been closer to the king, but where they're holding and what they do, so it's different, right? The way God judges them, is totally different. So a righteous individual, for a few minor infractions, they can be held accountable in a much greater way than somebody that's, not at that level. And that God will cut them some slack in different ways. Doesn't mean what they did is right, but God's not going to slam them, in such a way because they're not holding there. They're not at that level. They're not necessarily supposed to be at that level, right? And so if that's the case, so the way God deals with them, is totally different. But what's the bottom line, right? Now we'll get into reincarnation. What's the bottom line? The bottom line is a person, when they do something wrong, it's considered a rebellion against God, right? Whether they know, whether they don't know, totally irrelevant, right? It doesn't matter what they know, what they don't know. Bottom line, they did something wrong. Totally did something wrong. So if they do something wrong, they got to fix up the damage. They got to fix up the spiritual damage, maybe physical damage. We can understand if a person caused damage to somebody. So if that's the case, they have to pay, right? Whatever they're obligated. They may have to pay for the damage itself. They may have to pay. Person's out, is out of work. You may have to pay for that. You may have to pay for, medical bills. A lot of different things. Depends on what they did. So, in such a case, you're going to be liable for that, 100%. But there are two things here. You got the physical damage a person did. You also have the fact that you rebelled. It's a rebellion against God. When a person does something wrong, that's what it is. You did it by accident. You weren't thinking. You're half asleep. This, that. Doesn't matter. There's still payback. If a Jew, let's say they turned on a light by accident on Shabbos. They, set it up against the wall. There was a light switch. They weren't paying attention. The light switch went on, went off. So, they have to bring a sin offering over here. Okay, they did it by accident. Understood. Doesn't mean they're not liable. Not only that, but when they do something wrong, whatever that thing is, person has to look into what it is and what they did. And, if it's in the laws of Shabbos, let's say, so they have to work hard and, review the laws of Shabbos. If it's speaking Lashon Hara, God forbid, or listening to Lashon Hara, they transgress over here. So they should relearn or learn more in depth, the laws of Lashon Hara. In other words, what a person does, they have to fix because they made an imprint in the world, right? They made a spiritual imprint in the world. So I can understand if a person, let's say, they spoke badly against someone else. If they spoke badly against someone else, So the only way to get atonement, Yom Kippur doesn't help unless they appease them. They have to appease the other person. So by appeasing the other person, if the person says, yeah, I forgive you, that wipes it out. But that transgression in such a case never disappears unless they get atonement over here. So now based on all that, so a righteous person can suffer to rectify damage, to rectify spiritual damage in this world. And an individual, in general, can be reincarnated a number of times, maybe 3, 4 maximum. At least that's what I understand. In different bodies to rectify damage done in previous incarnations. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? So a person gets judged. When a person gets judged, God's going to look at our actions, where we were holding, why we did what we did. And he's going to judge it either for good or for bad, depending on, a lot of different factors. Now, what should happen? Most people are not inherently that evil. So what should happen? If a person didn't suffer enough in this world and go through enough difficulties in this world, what are difficulties? What is suffering in this world? Suffering is atonement, right? It atones for things that we did wrong. So, a person should say, well, we should love suffering because, it can help us get squeaky clean, in the next world. But let's say we don't get enough atonement. Let's say we don't get enough atonement. We didn't suffer, enough in this world. So there's a rectification process. What's the rectification process? The rectification process is going to Gehenna, right? Going to hell. That's a spiritual rectification. Now, as we said, most people are not so inherently evil, which means that their soul should be able to be fixed up. They're going to have to suffer at some level. And their soul should be fixed up in order to get all that benefits, in Olam Haba, and, in the spiritual world, right? However that looks, whatever that is, right? Some people may have to go through greater rectification. Some people have to go through less rectification. But let's say, God gives them an option. And God says, you know what? I can make you go through all the suffering. And this suffering is going to be hard. It's going to be painful. It's going to be painful. But God gives you an option. And God says, instead of doing this, I'll give you a second chance. I'll give you a second chance. And that second chance is I'm going to take your soul and I'm going to put it in a different body. And I'm going to give you an opportunity to fix up what you messed up before. So a person's given another opportunity. In all things being equal, if they do what they're supposed to do in this world, they get fixed. And then, they go straight to paradise. They go straight to Olam Haba, not a problem. But what can happen is the person also, when they come back to this world, they're not going to remember as well as we mentioned. Not going to remember anything previously. And they're going to have to go through everything they went through. They have to go through whatever they go through in this world. Again, they have to keep Torah mitzvahs at whatever level, for a Jew, for a non-Jew, whatever applies to them. They have to be careful what they see, what they hear. They have to go through all this again. And they're going to get judged again. Right? So, but they're given an opportunity. Now, they could be given an opportunity in a way where they can't do anything. Right? Let's say a person in this world, what's the worst of all character traits? It says in the ways of the righteous, in the gate of being conceited, is being conceited. That's the base of all bad character traits. So let's say somebody in this world had a big problem with this. They were absolutely conceited, right? And, caused a lot of problems, a lot of difficulties, all kinds of things. So what can happen? God can say, okay, I'll give you an opportunity. I'll give you an opportunity to rectify that. Right? So what does God do? So let's say the soul says, okay, I agree. Okay, very good. What does God do? So this person was totally conceited. They looked down upon it, every person. So what does God do? God could put that person in a messed up body. Right? Totally messed up body. Put them in an autistic body. Put it in a body, racked by disease. Be mentally challenged. Who knows? Or God could put them, let's say, in an inanimate object in order to get kicked around, right? And that's the whole purpose, for however long they're supposed to be here to get fixed up. God puts them in a rock. Why does God put them in a rock? Because you were so conceited. You thought you were God's gift to the world. You trampled on others. So guess what? God says, I'll help you get fixed up. What does God do? He puts the person's soul into a rock. Puts it into a rock. And what happens to a rock? They get thrown around. They get kicked around, etc. They can't affect anything, right? They get demolished. They get stepped on, walked on, kicked, this, that, all these things. Very good, right? That can fix a person up, right? So at the end of the day, that, a person, when they're in this, other body, so to speak, it's possible that they're going to be affected in such a way, because of what they did before. So therefore, the situation they're placed in may bring that special responsibility given to them. There was a story that someone said that they had to come back in this world, and they didn't pray. Let's say, one of the things that the main thing held against them was that, they didn't pray in synagogue in their city. I don't know if they prayed at all, whatever the case is. So what happened? They came back in this world as part of a wall in the synagogue. Right now, if you're part of a wall, think about it. You can't move, you can't do anything. You're part of this wall, you just stand there. I don't know exactly how it works. Right? Never been in that world to come back and experience this. But let's say, this person's part of the wall. Now what's the purpose of being part of the wall in a synagogue? The purpose is you're going to hear prayers 3 times a day, or maybe more, right? Let's say it's what we call a minion factory. They have prayers going on all day long, right? All morning long, all afternoon long, all night, thousands of prayers every day. So what does God do? Oh, you don't want to pray in the synagogue, in your neighborhood, you don't want to pray at all. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give you an opportunity to get fixed. I'm going to make you part of this wall to hear every last prayer. Every last prayer all day and all night. For how long? Can't answer. I have no idea. But the situation of what the person may be in, or what the soul may be in, is exactly corresponds to what they didn't do. Right? To what they didn't do in this world, what they failed at. Measure for measure. Right? And we always say, God judges the person measure for measure, whether we understand it. Whether we understand it or not, there are a lot of things that are hard to understand. And this question comes up quite a bit. People say, I'm going through this. Why? I don't know. I think some things that may be more obvious, some things less obvious, and we live in a world of Hester b'toch Hester panim. We're living in a world of God's hiddenness within hiddenness, right? So if it's not something that's obvious, that we would maybe never figure out, so to speak. So how can it be? How can it be that we should understand what it is, right? The Gemara brings down examples. Talmud says, if something happens, person goes through whatever difficulty it is. So you have to understand it's because of what we did. So the Gemara says you have to look into your actions. But looking into your actions, you're going to say, well, I have to repent. What do I have to work on? Everything. Something's more, something's less, whatever it is. But it's a sign. It's a sign God is saying, I want you to wake up over here. Now, do we exactly get the message what it is? Not necessarily. But if it's something that happens over and over, and we are creatures of bad habits, so there are things that we do, we get ourselves in bad situations, but at the end of the day, the end result can be exactly the same. Now, God doesn't want that, obviously. Right? He doesn't want us to make mistakes. But guess what? We can do things, and a person can do things over and over and over again. They don't get the message. They don't get the message until something really catastrophic may happen. People get caught up in different things. People get addicted to different things. And then how can they fix it up when they lose everything? Now, it doesn't have to be that way per se, but, sometimes that's, or maybe many times, that's the case. Someone who's an alcoholic, someone who's a gambler, let's say, they could lose everything before they realize, until they finally realize, they have to get help, right? And they have to, they have to take care of business. Otherwise they're not going to be able to function. Won't be able to function in life. So essentially, the judgment of a soul coming back is also going to depend on how close the individual came to reaching that perfected state. The Ramchal in Derech Hashem, in the way of God, says a person, in order to reach a portion of the world to come, Jew or non-Jew, there's a certain minimal level. There's a certain minimal level a person has to reach in order to have a portion of the world to come. Right? The Ramchal over there does not tell us. Doesn't tell us what that level is. There's a certain level. Right? There's a certain level. So in order to reach that perfected state, right, there are things we have to do. So if a person, let's say, did not reach that perfected state, they came short, or maybe very short, who knows how close they came. That could be a reason the soul comes back. And the soul may come back in order to rectify those imperfections that previously were not completed. The only problem is, I would say that this is a major issue, and that is if we are made up, meaning our soul, has come back in order to fix up whatever it is that we're supposed to fix up, and every soul has a mission, everybody does, right, to give us a little bit of a boost, a little bit of self-esteem. Nobody's in this world for no reason, right? Now, it could be sometimes, the soul have to go through things, as we said. The soul may have to, be knocked around in this world because of what it did previously, right? It may have to suffer to no end, because of what it did, previously in different ways. But in general, since we're not perfect by any stretch, and we didn't fix these imperfections, which we don't necessarily know what they are, but we didn't fix these imperfections. So guess what? The soul could come back in order to fix that. The only problem is, how do I know what they are? How do I know, what my mission in life is? So most people, if you would ask them, what are your strong points? So most people know what their strong points are. What they're good at. Most people know what they're not good at. Some people totally not mathematically inclined. Some people don't learn languages well. Some people see things spatially. Some people see things other ways, right? We all see things. We don't see things the same way. No two people are the same. That being the case, we don't know what we're doing here, per se, but we do know certainly what we're good at. We do know that not everyone has no purpose in life. If a person, let's say, God forbid, is racked by disease, or, is mentally challenged, right? Is totally mentally challenged over here. At the end of the day, they're under onus over here. They're not liable for mitzvahs because they have a 25 IQ, they or less than that. So why are they brought into this world? So their soul is going in a messed up body for different things it did. But as we mentioned, it's not punishment. Not punishment for the body per se, right? It's punishment for the soul. But, God is going to, God has to purge out. He has to purge out these imperfections. So we mentioned, a soul could be in this world, 3 times, maybe potentially 4 times. This is probably the last time around, right? For most of us, if not all of us, this is probably the last time around. So therefore, we got to get it right. We got to, try and reach whatever that potential is, whatever that perfection is. And if we don't know, we can't waste time. We can't waste time, right? We're not here that long. So at the end of the day, after a person dies, and if this is the last time, you're not coming back. So, okay, that's it. You had an opportunity. Either you did it, you were successful, or you weren't successful, or you're more successful, less successful. And at that point, there's no other opportunity to come back. Right? If there's no other opportunity to come back, it could be there still needs to be rectification. Right? Depending on what a person goes through. Right? For some people, when they come back to this world, they go through certain things and that's it. And once they die, God took care of them, they can go straight into paradise. Right? They can go, they can have a portion of the world to come. Very good. Right? Is it going to be everybody like that? Depends what they go through. Depends what the imperfections that they have to fix. Right? And if and I would say like this, if a person's, we all suffer in this world. There's no question. People suffer with difficulties with health, people difficulties with family, people difficulties, livelihood, a million different things, disappointment, self-esteem, right? That's why I have this group, Pain is Your Gain, right? Seeing the bigger picture and how it all affects us and how we're supposed to deal with it, right? Obviously not therapy and certainly, not coaching in that sense, but, helping people see the bigger picture. So yeah, there are a lot of, we have a lot of imperfections and we have to try and fix up those imperfections to the best, for the best of our ability. But if a person's in this world and we suffer, and again, some people are going to have it more, some people are going to have it less, whatever it is, that suffering atones 100%. And the suffering the Gemara says, the Talmud tells us, that suffering could be, I'm looking in my pocket for a certain amount of change, and you come up with other things, whatever it is, that's also suffering. You don't come up with exactly what you need, right? It's also a form of suffering. But we have to be introspective. We have to look into ourselves, and there are patterns. There are people that, God forbid, get into bad patterns, get into bad habits over here. So God is going to look at the whole picture. He's going to take into account all the details. Because you have to remember, God put you in a certain body. And you have to remember as well, as Ramchal says in Path of the Just, says it in Derech Hashem, in the way of God, this is a world of distraction. Tremendous world of distraction. So, a person person's got a purpose. They're supposed to do certain things. And what happens? You get thrown off, over here. Why? You get distracted. Is it easy to get distracted in this world? Yeah. 100%. It's easy to get distracted. Does God want you to get distracted? No. But God understands this is what the world is. And he put us in this world to get through the distraction. He put us in this world to be able to uplift the body and the soul. How are you going to do that? We spoke about suffering, meaning that there's always a conflict, body and soul. So the body wants to go after physicality. So when a person goes after physicality, when it's forbidden, it debases the body, debases the soul. When a person goes after spiritual things in the right way, you uplift the body, you uplift the soul. Then you're doing what God wants. But there's always a conflict. There's a conflict, from the time a person's born to the time a person dies. There's a conflict between body and soul. So now it's going to depend what you did and what your actions are. And there are plenty of people out there that can get information. If they want to tune in to God's world, they can get information, get the right information, you can get wrong information. Right? And someone once asked me, said, what about all those people in India worshiping cows and other things? And idolatry. Okay. What about them? They say, well, it's not their fault. Well, whose fault is it? Most people have an internet connection. If they want to see the truth, they could. The Talmud says the person wants to go in the right direction, God will help them. If they don't want to go in the right direction, God will not stop them. Right? So if that's the case, everyone makes a choice. You're going to say, okay, a person grew up in communist Russia and he became, he's a communist and an atheist and this and that. Okay. So what? Everyone has greater potential. Who says you're supposed to, drink the Kool-Aid, so to speak? The person grows up in the Western world in the lap of luxury. We're all living, many ways in the lap of luxury, some more, some less. Remember, before World War II, people in Europe, they were starving. There was no food. There was no food. So, we're living in the lap of luxury in so many different ways. Some people more, some people less. It doesn't matter. But that has an effect. That's what Mordechai Pogromansky, bless the memory, told my Rebbe after World War II. He said, that's going to be the test now. Test after the war. Test of the war was Emunah, was faith in God and how he runs the world. The test after that, he said, is going to be great wealth. Prophecy in the Torah, in the book of Deuteronomy. That's going to be, the last generation before the Messiah comes. Wealth, right? Are you going to kick God in the face and say, I did everything myself? Me, myself, and I, again, back to Sybil complex. I'm the self-made man, right? Or you're going to give credit where credit deserves, right? That's going to be a test, huge, right? It's going to be a huge test. That's the test of this. That's the test of this generation. So you're going to say, but there are a lot of interesting things out in the world. That person can get distracted, right? Let's mention one thing. What's going on now? In Qatar, the World Cup. Thousands, millions of people involved. Who's winning, who's not, who got out, who's all these things. All these things. So you're gonna say, well, it's fun, it's entertaining. Again, we've spoken about sports in in different contexts, but it's distracting. 100%. People follow it. Who's up, who's down, statistics. People can get totally carried away. But it's the most, the World Cup, the most watched game in the world. Maybe second most watched game is the Super Bowl. But it's like unbelievable, right? So God will say, I didn't tell you to get distracted. I didn't tell you to watch all this stuff. I didn't tell you to waste all this time, getting involved in that and movies and all kinds of other things. I didn't tell you to do that. Right? But we live in a world of distraction. So if we live in a world of distraction, what does that do? That takes us away. That takes us away what I'm supposed to do. So a person will ask. A person will say, what, I have to be steeped in Torah 24/7? So if you're a Jew, you have to put food on the table, okay? So you have to work, and when you're not working. So we're trying to reach perfection. We're trying to fix up any bad character trait. We're trying to tune into God's world. Non-Jews have different obligations, right? Different obligations, but they also have to tune in. They also have to learn. I wouldn't say they have to learn every second like a Jew would, in general. But there's that general obligation of tuning in. So we make the bed we lie in, right? That's the quote. Get upstairs. We have nothing to say that I didn't do this or I didn't do that. Remember, the first movie a person's going to see is everything you did, right? So you're going to see a portion of the video. Let's say a person had their hand caught in the cookie jar. You can't say I didn't do it. You can't say my hand wasn't there. Your hand was there. It's clear your hand was there. So now you want to justify. You want to justify why it was there, why you did this or why you did that. So God can say, okay, I know what all your excuses are, and he knocks them off. Maybe you'll get a little bit of credit, maybe, right? I'll give you a drop of credit, maybe, right? For certain things. But he's going to judge it the way he sees it. So God is going to take into account all these details, how they were educated, what their socioeconomic situation is, right? God's going to take into account, family. God's going to take into account if they were bullied. He's going to take into account all these things, right? But, even if a person had whatever difficulties, a person has to remember that's not a free pass. That in no way gives a person a free pass just to say, well, this happened, that happened, God put me in the situation. Let's say he did. Let's say he did. So what? It doesn't really matter if he put you in this situation. The question is, how do I view it? How do I deal with it? Do I sanctify God's name, or God forbid, the other way? So God's going to take all that into account, and hopefully he's going to have compassion. He's going to have compassion on us. I just, last thing I'll mention is something, I always speak about, and that is we don't know what our potential is. Nobody knows what their true potential is. But imagine you go through certain things in life, and it could be trauma, it could be anything, that God now sucks out certain things of your character traits you never thought you had. Right? So as I mentioned, I started this group, Pain is Your Gain, and a lot of it has to do with, it's good therapy for myself, things I went through, and difficulties in, dealing with them and seeing the bigger picture. But guess what? If I wouldn't have gone through that and gone through all kinds of different things, would I have the ability to open my mouth and say anything? I could say, listen, I learned this, I learned that about it, different things. But when a person's gone through it themselves, let's say someone had a dreaded disease, God forbid, they overcame it, right? And, they went through chemo and they were sick and this and that, and how they persevered and how their immune was intact. So that's a whole different thing. But they wouldn't have had that strong, belief and faith in God had they not gone through it. So you're going to say, well, is it better I went through it or not? We say we should have trials and tribulations, but you don't grow without them. So it's all about potential. So when I learned about this years ago, I said, wow, a person got such great potential and we don't even know what it is, right? So why am I going to waste time on other things? I'm here to reach whatever that potential is. But guess what? There are a lot of things thrown in our path, a lot of stumbling blocks, a lot of things we may do ourselves. Well, the evil inclination comes along, takes care of other things. So that's what we're here for. We're here to fight all that and to keep ourselves intact and do what God wants us to do. Is that going to be easy? No. Certainly, it's certainly not going to be easy. But again, we're not going to have any excuses later and say, oh, I didn't know. What do you mean you didn't know? Noahide will say, I know anything about the Noahide laws. Well, Noahide laws not steal. You stole against Uncle Sam. Oh, that's different. Come on, he takes too much taxes. Euthanasia, come on, we want Grandpa to die anyway. He was suffering this and that. Okay, we hold that's murder. How did you not know that? These are things obvious. Obvious for non-Jews. So everything gets taken into account, right? Everything we did. So that's a scary thing. So most people are probably not going to go to sleep. It's a scary proposition. But you know what? We don't have a choice. We're born against our will. We die against our will, right? So we have to take all that into account, and we have to, as I would say, you can't rest on your laurels. You have, just because I did this yesterday, today's a new day. I have to serve God with great joy, with great fervor. Doesn't matter what happened yesterday. Doesn't matter what happened the day before. Each day a person gets judged. Right? Sorry, each person, has that day, and after that day, before they, plop their head on the pillow, they got to think, did I accomplish? What did I accomplish? What didn't I accomplish? What do I have to work on? People have to take stock. We have to take stock of what we've done. We're not here that long. King David says 70 years, 70 years if you have strength, 80 years. Time goes by very quick. So, we don't want to see things at the last second. Say, oh, now I got to do this, do that. And now, it's almost too late. So, you got to see, the bigger picture. And we have to keep in mind one other thing, and that is God's not looking to zap us. God is not this big ogre who's going to say, yeah, I'm going to zap you for this. I'm going to zap you for that, zap you for the other thing and make life so difficult. God has compassion, right? God does have a lot of compassion. At the same time, though, if a person keeps doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, and they spit in God's face and this and that, I'm not saying, we don't have trials and tribulations and we don't have difficulties, but at some point God can say, come on, you told me this yesterday, you told me that the day before. You got to work, you got to strive, you got to, and we have ups and downs. God understands that. God absolutely understands that. But again, food for thought, the closer you are to the king, the worse it can be. Right, but I would say rather suffer now than suffer more later. So I guess that would be a wrap.
All right. Well, there you go. Hopefully that answered everybody's questions. If not, feel free to add your questions into the chat, and we'll see if we can catch up with it later, or send me an email to TaNaChTalkQuestions@gmail.com for any clarifications you might need. Guys, thank you for watching tonight. Click that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Turn on all notifications so you don't miss anything. And until next week, Rabbi, that was a great show, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Shalom, my dear friends. Hope this message finds you well. If you like the way this channel is going, and the channel has been a blessing to you, please consider supporting the channel by going to the website, TaNaChTalk.com, TaNaChTalk.com. Thank you once again for your time and for supporting TaNaCh Talk. Shalom.
אני אתה אתם תמיד